wasn't working for a religious organization. I mean, one might expect working for a church that if you're not a member of the church to be proselytized, but working for HP, it's not at all obvious that you would expect that. And so the harder case for me is, what if HP wanted to be a religious corporation? And what if, instead of those signs saying the sort of frankly awkward things that they said, they wanted to post the biblical verses on the walls of HP, and they wanted to be a religious corporation and a for-profit corporation with all of the legal benefits that comes from that. And there it becomes less obvious to me that a corporation can, that might be a case of having your cake and eating it too, that if you want to make money, you can make money, and if you want to preach the gospel, you can preach the gospel. But I'm not sure about that. I mean, that's a question of what should be for-profit and what should be tax-exempt, and maybe there's a plausible claim that you have the right to not only preach the gospel, but make money doing it. I'm sort of neutral on that question. But that, I think, is the harder case. I think the principles that guide me here, as they, I think, guide this discussion, are the Golden Rule, and the kind of subset of the Golden Rule, which is you have the right to do your thing, but you don't have the right to make everyone else do your thing, and you certainly don't have the right to stop the rest of us from doing our thing. And that seems to be a confusion on the part of this employee, that certainly he has the right to preach the gospel and try to save people, but why he has the right to do that while he's out making money is just not clear to me.
Yeah, and I'm not a legal expert at all, but I'll jump into this because I usually can find something to say about just about anything. And I think I liked that you mentioned the Golden Rule, because there's a great deal of religious diversity in this country. I mean, people believe all different kinds of things. And if you go to the world, it's even more diverse. But the Golden Rule, frankly, is something that's common to virtually every religion in the world. And it's treating other people like you would want them to treat you. And that's really basic. It's basic to ethical systems of atheists and agnostics, as well as Christians and Muslims and Mormons and Unitarians and just about everybody. And I guess I'll just say too, I mean, I worked for Social Security Administration for 25 years. We had a great deal of diversity. People needed to be kind to other people, and that's really what it's about.
Well, perhaps what we're going to find on this issue is that there's just this line of agreement across the front. I'm not sure, but I would have to agree with Professor Rosky, particularly on the issue that you rarely find preaching of the gospel and money in the same sentence. They don't tend to go hand in hand. If you're doing the one, you're probably not making much of the other. However, I think on this issue, really in the workplace, protecting people from harassment is important, and it would be rather ironic if, while a company was trying to campaign to end other forms of harassment, it was providing opportunity for one of its employees to harass those around him. So I'm in absolute agreement with that. Religious faiths, of course, run the entire gamut, and some, of course, are not going to agree with this opinion, but for many of us who are in the cloth, we would say that those doors need to be opened pretty wide, and finding room for discussion is the way you find room for faith.
Well, I, for better or for worse, am a lawyer, so I will talk about this initially legalistically. Although maybe not so much as that suggests. The hypothetical, well, it's not a hypothetical, the case represents, I think, the problem of pluralism, we're all really different. And every decade that passes, the United States becomes more and more different, more and more diverse. And I guess rather than call it a problem, maybe I should just describe it as the fact of pluralism. The fact of pluralism is that if you're going to be in public, you can't expect everything to be exactly the way you want it, because not everyone is the same as you, and so you put a bunch of really diverse people in public and everybody has to give up something. So, like Professor Rosky, I don't doubt the sincerity of this believer's religious duty to denounce evil wherever he sees it. But if he's going to be in public, if he's going to work for a corporation that's organized for making money and it cares about the productivity of its workers, and you know, people going around denouncing each other as evil, it's not conducive to productivity. It's going to have to give that up. Should be able to denounce evil in private, at home, in his church. There are some difficult gray areas. What if it were a nonprofit organization, you know, dedicated to certain principles? Well, then, sort of maybe like a church, you could expect certain kinds of principles to be preached and certain kinds of principles not to be. But I think that's just something that we all have to recognize, is that we live in a country in which agreement in public is impossible, and therefore compromise is always necessary. I guess the only other thing that I would add is just to underline what I expect all the panelists would agree with, is that this sort of thing actually happens in both directions. At this sort of event, there's some real resonance, some real sympathy, I think, and some antipathy for the activities of this sort of believer, denouncing racial and ethnic minorities, LGBT minorities who already have plenty of obstacles already in their life. But there are, of course, areas of the country and organizations in which everything is reversed, in which liberal politics and liberal commitments are the norm, and someone who is religiously conservative will experience the same sort of thing. So I think we just need to remember that it's a two-way street, that if we want to protect people with, well, we want to protect people in a way that's consistent. Nobody should have to experience religious discrimination or religious harassment in the workplace any more than someone should have to experience racial or ethnic or sexual orientation discrimination. And that goes whether the religion is theologically liberal or theologically conservative.
Well, since you've been unanimous, you forced the moderator then to raise the question. If as you say, Professor Gedicks, individuals when they go to work shouldn't be faced with religious discrimination, have you no sympathy for Mr. Peterson, who believes that this is a direct affront against his own religious beliefs, and he's confronted with this every day when he goes to work? Why should he have to put up with that? Or be silenced from expressing his own view?
Well, he's not silenced. He can go down to the city park and express his views. He may have to get a permit first, but he can write letters to the editor. He can express himself. He certainly would not be required to do anything at Hewlett-Packard which indicates affirmative agreement.
Well, what if he were? What if the company asked employees to pledge their support for their diversity policy?
I guess I would ask what the point of that would be.